Hey guys, Skinny here, and today I'm going to do my best to teach you how to play the Blight in Dead by Daylight. For those of you who are familiar with my channel, or even maybe some of you newcomers out there, I have been maining the Blight since his release back in September last year. It took me a little while to find my footing with him, and I'm going to admit I did give up with him a few times and sort of pick him up and put him down, but eventually I persevered and I stuck through, and here I am today maining him, and I can pretty much confidently say I'm probably a very decent Blight player. I won't say the best, because there's far better people who can play Blight out there than me, and I make a lot of mistakes, but having said that, I still think I can teach anyone looking to play him how to use his power correctly, and hopefully I haven't scared any of you away and you stick around to listen. But all that intro out the way, I think we should just dive straight into this guy right now. So, to start with, what is Blight's power? Blight's power is called Blighted Corruption. What this lets you do is when you click the power button, you will launch forward in what is known as a rush, and this will send you going forward in whatever direction you were looking at the time, with a limited turn rate and very limited control over what direction you're going. It's literally you go forward and that's it. You can't go back, left, right, no. You go forward and you can slightly turn with the mouse. You will move at 230% movement speed during the rush, and this will last for 3 seconds, at the end of which, if you didn't hit into anything, you will trigger a fatigue state, and then your power will be unavailable to you until you get back all 5 of your tokens. When you do use your rush, it will only consume 1 token, and this happens for every single rush. So the first one takes 1, second takes another, third, 4th, and then 5th, and then that's it. So the main goal of the first rush is to find something to slam into. A tree, a wall, a gen, a hook, anything like that. You want to hit into that during that first rush and trigger what is called the slam. In the slam, you have full control over your turn rate on your camera again, and you can slightly adjust Blight's movement with the movement keys. And what your goal at that point is to find something else to bump into and then launch yourself forward back at that thing with the power button again. This will then trigger what's known as a lethal rush, which behaves the exact same as the normal rush, only this time you're allowed to launch an attack out of it by pressing the standard attack button. The purpose of the power, once you've got into this lethal rush state, is to just go between objects, bouncing and bouncing, until you see a survivor and either get a hit on them with your power, or at least get close enough to them to begin a chase so that they don't have as much of a head start on you. So, just to run by a few smaller sort of brief stats for what the power is. As mentioned, you have 5 tokens by default with the power, and it takes 2 seconds per token to regenerate every token. So if you've used all 5 of your tokens, that's going to take 10 seconds to get your power back. 2 for each token, obviously. It only takes 1 second to activate the power, which sounds long, but it's literally just as soon as you click the power button, you're off. The chain rush window, so when you slam into something, that little adjustment time of where you go, that lasts 1.25 seconds, but this can be changed with add-ons. As stated, every rush lasts for 3 seconds, but every lethal rush can be extended by another extra second if you swing an attack right at the very end of that 3 seconds. You'll know when to time this because you'll feel a slight slowdown in Blight's movement. You can see it in his camera. You'll see that he starts to sort of get slower and things start to sort of come back, like, you know, you start to get a better bearing of where you are. You're not just zooming past things anymore. You start to notice what's around you because you slow down. If you swing at that moment, you will extend the rush by 1 extra second. The turn rate of rushes and lethal rushes is 0.9 degrees a second, but when you swing an attack out of a lethal rush, this gets increased to 1.6 degrees a second. This will come in handy later. The fatigue state lasts for 2.5 seconds by default, but if you hit a survivor, that goes up to 3 seconds. So successful hits is 3 seconds, but just generic random, you know, you didn't hit into anything, or you yeah, any of those fatigues is 2.5 seconds. So now that I've covered what the power is and the numbers behind that, I'm now going to give you a basic guide on how I think you should use Blight's power as a beginner. So firstly, as a beginner, I would recommend only ever moving in straight lines during a rush. You don't want to try and curve too much, because this is going to make it more likely that you'll miss something. What you want to do is you want to see something in the distance and go, okay, I see that tree, I want to hit that tree. So you look at it, you click your power button, and you just let it go. You don't move the mouse at all, or the stick if you're on controller. Just go forward, hit the tree, let it do its thing. Don't curve the mouse at all. When you start to get a little bit better with Blight and you get a better feel for how his power works, and you get better swinging with him and stuff like that, then maybe you can start experimenting with curving and try to flick into objects during a rush. But at first, when you first start playing him, I would recommend just straight lines only. Know what you're going to hit, look at it, go for it, don't bother curving into it. Another tip I'll give is be patient. You don't want to rush with the power. I know the power's called rush, but you don't want to, throw away like 4 of your tokens in a second because you're just spam clicking the power button. What you want to do is you want to plan what happens with your rush, and you want to use that 1.25 second adjustment time during a slam to make sure you're going to hit something that you want to hit, not something you don't want to hit. So if you say you are slamming into a doorway, if you immediately click the slam button again in that doorway, you're probably going to hit the doorway again. You're not going to move anywhere, you're just going to waste a token slamming. But if you are patient and you use that time to adjust yourself so that you're not going to clip the doorway, you're more likely to fly straight through. You can also use patience to predict a survivor's movements, because one of the things survivors will do is they'll try and bait you. They'll go one direction and then switch at the last second, or they'll double back on themselves. If you're patient and you don't immediately swing at them as they come at you, or you think they've got dead hard and they double back into you, what you want to do is you want to go past them, you want to hit a wall, be patient, try and find them, and then when you found them, then you rush. You don't want to think, oh, he's coming at me, quick swing, because you'll miss. You don't want to go past them and panic and think, oh god, I've lost them, and then immediately rush in a random direction. You want to know exactly what you're doing, and you want to be patient and use that time in your slam to adjust yourself, and whatever you do, don't rush. That doesn't mean don't use the power. It's really confusing. The power is called rush, but you don't want to rush with rush. Just be patient, and yeah. Another thing I've already covered in the previous 2 points is you always want to know what you're going to hit, and don't change this target during a rush. So like I said earlier, if I said I want to hit a tree, I want to hit that tree. I don't want to halfway through that rush spot a survivor and go, oh, I'll go for them now, because you have such a limited turn rate and such lack of control over Blight. Doing that increases the chances that you're going to mess up. If you see a survivor during a rush but you've already planned to hit a tree, go and hit that tree. And then when you've slammed into that tree, use the time to find that survivor and then go for them. Don't swing just because they come in the way. It may mean sometimes you might miss out on what you thought you could have hit, but it's fine. If you lose a hit at one point, you're most likely going to get it back later if you're patient and know what you're doing and know what you're hitting. This also goes for if you want to hit a survivor in your rush. If you see a survivor running and you think, yep, I want to hit that person and I know I can hit them with this rush, don't halfway through that rush change your mind and decide to hit a wall behind them or switch to a different survivor because there happens to be 2 of them. If you're committing to that one person, commit to that one person, and I can guarantee you'll be more likely to hit more of your power by knowing exactly what you're going to hit and planning to hit that thing as well. I've also said previously you want to predict a survivor's movements. One of the easiest ways for survivors to dodge you, and one of the biggest things you'll fall for in your first time playing Blight, is they'll start running in one direction. Maybe they'll go left, maybe they'll go right. You'll rush towards them, swing left to hit them, and then the last second, they'll switch. They'll go the other direction. If they're going left, they'll do a sharp turn right, or vice versa. This is one of the easiest ways survivors can dodge you, and you want to use that to your advantage and try and predict that that's what they're going to do. Like I said earlier, if an injured survivor is running away from you and mid-rush they suddenly turn around and run straight at you, they probably have dead hard and they're probably going to go past you. You don't want to swing for that because you won't hit them. You want to know that they're going to dead hard and go, right, I'm going to run at them, bait them into using their dead hard, but then hit a thing behind them, flip, and then get them when they no longer have dead hard. This isn't always the case, but I've noticed a lot of the time is a survivor will only ever really try to juke you once. And if they think they've dodged you once, that's it. If you don't fall for their initial dodge and then bounce off something and then come back, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to try a second dodge because they don't expect you to come back and you'll get a down when they think they've lost you. Like I said, that's not always the case, but a lot of the times I've noticed that survivors do not expect a Blight to come back again after they think they've juked you once. But ultimately, the biggest and best basic tip I can give you is experience is one of your best teachers as a Blight. He's not a killer I would recommend to someone who's just picked up the game. You know, I wouldn't say if you don't know anything about this game, you don't know what a loop is, what a tile is, you don't know the maps at all, don't play Blight. He's a killer whose difficulty largely comes in the fact that you need to know how this game works. You need to know what a loop is, you need to know map layouts, props, all that stuff. Blight as a killer requires intense game knowledge. You need to know most, if not every loop, like the back of your hand. You need to know how survivors are going to run. You need to know the basics of how to play a normal M1 killer before you try and play Blight. This isn't just a case for deciding to pick him up as well, though, because you aren't going to be... If you're someone who's got like 1,000 hours and you think, alright, no, I'll give Blight a go, I think I can play this killer, you're not immediately going to play your first match and be a god and get like a 4k at 5 gens and like down everyone with your power. Blight's power is something that you need to learn through trial and error. You need to throw yourself at random loops thinking, I might be able to get my power here, and learn when you can and can't get hits with your power. And this is also something that you're going to betray yourself on a lot as well. You might, when you're starting out with Blight, try and rush around, let's say, a jungle gym. You might try and rush around a jungle gym and think, oh, I can't land that with that, I'll just never use Blight's power there again. But maybe sometime later down the line, when you get a bit more confident with his power, you might try it again, and what used to be something you couldn't hit might turn into something you can hit now. Again, though, that's also very dependent on the situation. It's difficult to advise how to play a Blight. I know it sounds stupid saying that in a guide, but it's difficult to advise how exactly to play a Blight because it's a lot of situational based and experience based stuff, and telling one person how to play him might be completely different on telling someone else how to play him based on who's got more experience. But all I'll say is experience is one of your best teachers, both from a general game knowledge point of view and power knowledge of Blight point of view. But yeah, sum up those tips in a short notice. Straight lines, patience, know what you want to hit and commit, predict survivors' movements, and experience is your best teacher out there. So, now I'm going to move on to some builds you might want to use with Blight that really tailor to his kit and will help you get good gameplay. So starting off, this is my personal build that I use on my Blight mainly. This is the go-to build I will use for him. It's the perks Pop Goes the Weasel, Oppression, Surveillance, and Barbecue and Chili. The goal of this build is that you make use of the fact that Blight can get really quick hits and downs to get an early pop and an early barbecue and figure out where the survivors are and what gens they're on, and then you go to that gen, you hit it with pop, Oppression will light up any other gens that they may have worked on, and Surveillance will help you see if they did hit the Oppression skill check or if the gen's regressing, because unfortunately one of the biggest weaknesses with Oppression is that you don't know if they hit the skill check or if the gen's regressing. The only information it gives you is if they mess up the skill check. So the whole goal of having a Surveillance there is to tell you when a gen's just starting regressing and when they actually hit the skill check, because then you'll know, okay, that gen should have lit up white, but it didn't. That means they hit the skill check, I need to get over there because they've probably got progress on it. You can, if you want, this is just entirely up to personal preference, you can take Surveillance out and sub it out for something like Tinkerer or maybe Discordance, Personally, I prefer not to do this because I'm used to using oppression and surveillance together. But again, entirely up to you. But I would say that pop, oppression, surveillance, barbecue is a good go-to build that I would use on Blight. There is, of course, always the build, as I call it, in very big air quotes. This is the build that most of you will be familiar with. Pretty much every Blight uses this, and it's because it's a very strong build. I'm guilty of using this for a time before I started moving on to trying to use different perks. This is, of course, Ruin, Undying, Tinkerer, and Barbecue. Even with Undying's upcoming rework / nerf kind of thing, I still think this is going to be one of the strongest builds for a Blight, because you can just have near constant gen pressure. The gens will pretty much always be regressing. If they get too much, you'll know, because Tinker will go off. You can just zip over there in the blink of an eye because you move really fast. This build is notorious and well known and used by pretty much all Blights because it's such a strong build. It does, however, come with the downside that a lot of survivors are going to get very mad at you for using this build. But at the end of the day, it's your game, play it your way. If you want to use the build and use Ruin, Undying, Tinker, or Barbecue, go right ahead. No one's going to stop you. Play how you want. And the third and final build that I'm going to tell you is a DLC-less build. This is if you only have Blight and only have points in Blight's levels and don't have any other killer leveled up. I wouldn't recommend this. Not the build, I wouldn't recommend doing that. I would recommend, like I said, experience as a teacher. You want to have other killers and you want to know how to play other killers. But if you are going to try and play Blight and only Blight, this is a build I would use if you've only got his perks and the basic killer perks. This is Sloppy Butcher, Undying, Blood Favor, and Whispers. This build uses Undying and Blood Favor to help you deny pallets, because that's going to be one of the biggest ways survivors will try to stop you, is they'll throw pallets down, they'll camp them, they'll use those to defend themselves against your rushes. So one of the best ways you can stop that is use Blood Favor to block off those pallets and deny the survivors from being able to drop them. Undying's there to keep Blood Favor going, because they're both hex perks. Whispers is there to help you locate and find survivors, and Sloppy is there to give your power a bit of a boost and to keep them off gens a little bit. Because Blight's power only damages at 1 health state at a time, if a survivor is healthy a lot, or if the survivors are always pretty much at full health a lot, you're not going to get much value out of your power, because you're just going to be doing injuries, and it would be like a Legion chasing someone who's injured in Feral Frenzy. You're not making any progress, basically, if they're just constantly healing. So Sloppy is there to make sure that they're less likely to be healed, more likely to be injured, and it's more likely for you to get a nice easy down with your power. But yeah, that's some builds that I think you would be good using if you want to get into playing Blight. But at the end of the day, of course, you can always use whatever you want. You don't have to use what I've suggested, but these are just some good, strong builds that I recommend you use if you consider playing Blight seriously. Obviously, there's stuff like meme builds and stuff like that, but these are some serious, proper, good, like, just, I don't want to say sweaty, but, like, you know, you're playing the game as it's intended builds. You use these. So, now we move on to probably the biggest section of this guide, and that is Blight's add-ons. I'm going to be going through each and every add-on from each and every colour category, and I'll explain every single one of them and whether they're worth using or not. Yeah. So starting off with the brown tier or grey tier, depends on what you want to call them. We have first in line is the Placebo Tablet. This add-on gives you 100 bonus blood points for rush score events, so this is using your power, getting hits with your power, anything involving your power, you will get 100% more blood points for it. However, it really slows Blight down. It's literally just an add-on mid designed for BP farming, and even then it's not even worth using, because it's all it does is it makes you get to maximum deviousness points sooner than you would not using it, and it slows you down. It's really, just don't bother using the Placebo Tablet. Next up we have the Foxglove. This reduces the fatigue time, so the time you are in your cooldown for after a missed slam or a missed hit by 0.25 seconds. Really, I wouldn't recommend this. might be good for when you're just starting out and you miss a lot of things, but yeah, I wouldn't use this, especially because these fatigue time add-ons do not affect successful hit cooldown. So remember, I said earlier that Blight, he will have a 2.5 second cooldown if it's a normal miss, and a 3 second cooldown if you hit a survivor. If you use these cooldown add-ons, it will always be 3 seconds if you hit the survivor. Even if you've got Foxglove or the next one coming up, you will always have a 3 second cooldown if you hit the survivor, even with these add-ons. It only affects the missed rush or failed swing cooldown. Next up is Compound 7. This add-on makes you face the nearest survivor within 16 meters of a slam. It's very, very disorientating because it basically, as soon as you slam into something, if there's a survivor within 16 meters, it will hijack your camera and throw you aiming at that person. Could be very good for someone who's new to Blight if you don't quite have an idea of how survivors run. However, survivors make a lot of noise, they're very predictable, they leave scratch marks, and it's not that hard to figure out where they are just after you slam into something. So I wouldn't, personally, I wouldn't use Compound 7 just because of how disorientating it is, but if you want to use it because you're a beginner and you need that little bit of extra guidance to know exactly kind of where survivors are going, then yeah, go ahead, run this. Lastly, for the brown category, there's Chipped Monocle. This add-on will show you with a little target indicator what you're going to slam into. Really, really great add-on for beginners. It's similar to the Nurse Blink indicator or the one for the twins that shows you where Victor's going to pounce. It's just a guidance for someone who's brand new to the power and needs to learn these things. Really good for a beginner. It'll show you what you will and won't slam into. It'll also show you what is in range for you. If you're not going to hit into anything, obviously the target doesn't show up. However, once you get to the point where you understand the range and the distance and everything with Blight's power, this becomes a really irrelevant add-on. It's purely just for beginners, which is pretty much just an easy way to sum up the brown category of Blight's add-ons. They're all basically just good for beginners, but really not worth using. Moving on to the yellow category of add-ons, we start off with Shredded Notes. What this one does is it reduces the recharge time per token by 0.33 seconds, so down from 2 seconds per token to 1.77 seconds. It also, however, removes one of your tokens, so instead of having 5, you have 4 and they regenerate slightly quicker. It's an okay add-on. It's very opinion-based if you think this is good or not. I myself don't like to use it, but it can pair very nicely with one of Blight's pink add-ons, the Iridescent Blight tag, which I will cover when I get to that. Next for yellow add-ons, we have Pustular Dust. This increases the time during a slam by 0.75 seconds. This can be a really good add-on for beginners because it gives you that extra, it gives you 2 seconds to adjust where you're going to go in your next slam rather than 1.25. But again, this is something that once you get comfortable with Blight and you know how to adjust his slam and where to send it, you're not going to need this. And in fact, it might hurt you when you start getting good because it'll mess with your muscle memory of what you can and can't adjust. So overall, I'd say Pustular Dust, good for beginners, but once you get good with him, learn to stop using these add-ons because you don't want to crutch on them, you don't want to rely on them. Next we have Plague Bile. Now this is one of the best add-ons for Blight. It's one of the strongest ones. Not just this specific add-on, but this category of add-ons. What Plague Bile does is it increases the turn rate during your rush by 10%. The reason this is one of the best, even whether you're beginner or whether you're comfortable with Blight, is it gives you more turn rate, so it gives you better control over your rush. One thing I'm not too certain of, which is not something you want to hear in a guide, but hey-ho, is I don't know if this affects the attack swing turn rate. Remember I said that the turn rate breaks up into 2 types. You have the standard turn rate when you're rushing, and that's like 0.9 degrees a second, and then when you swing it goes up to 1.6. I don't know if Plague Bile and the other turn rate add-on affect the swing, or if it's just the movement. I think from what I've seen through playing, it doesn't, but I don't know, I'm not too sure here. You might figure out yourself, but overall I'll say Plague Bile, one of the best add-ons Blight has, because anything that increases turn rate, gives you better control, is what you want. Next we have Cankerthorn. This is another fatigue add-on. This one decreases it by 0.5 seconds or half a second. Again, not that bad for a beginner, but it same as the last one, it's not really worth it, and again, it doesn't even affect the successful hit, so there's no real point in using it. Finally, for yellows, we have another brilliant category of add-ons for Blight. This is the speed add-ons. This is the Blighted Rat. It will increase your rush movement speed by 4% for each consecutive rush. So, a bit of confusing wording there, but what this means is you'll start your first rush in 230% movement speed. Your second rush will be 234. Your third, 238, fourth, 242, and finally 246 in the fifth and final rush. Basically, what it does is it makes you slightly faster the longer you can carry the chain on for. So by the last one, you'll be going very, very fast, but you will not be able to bounce into anything else. That's your last rush. These are some really, really good add-ons, especially when paired with his turn rate, because without them, Blight moves at 230 in all of his rushes. In every single rush without a speed add-on, he's 230 movement speed. But if you throw a speed add-on on, you'll get faster and faster and faster, and this can actually trick survivors out, because they won't expect you to reach a certain point as quickly as you do, and you might be able to get better hits, especially with turn rate, where you'll be able to make slightly sharper flicks. But that covers all of his yellow category of add-ons. Again, pretty much mostly just irrelevant, useless add-ons, apart from the Rat and the Plague Bile, but that's typically how the lower tier add-ons work. Moving on to green, we start with another turn rate. This is the Umbra Salts. This will increase your turn rate by 15%. Again, really, really strong add-on. Obviously better than Plague Bile because you're getting that extra 5% over that. Really, really solid, strong add-on. Probably one of his best available to him on the market. Rose Tonic is the next add-on. This will increase the slam duration by a whole second. Again, another great one for beginners, but once you learn how to control, you don't really want long slam duration. Especially because, actually, something I didn't mention is the longer you spend in a slam, the easier it is for survivors to kind of get an idea of where you are and see where you're going to come from. I know I said earlier you don't want to rush with this power, but you also don't want to take too much time, because if the survivors can catch where you've slammed into and they know where you're at, it's easier for them to see you're coming towards them and counter that. But yes, Rose Tonic, good for beginners, wouldn't really recommend beyond that. Compound 21, now this used to be one of his strongest add-ons until it got massively, massively nerfed because it was quite a bit overpowered. What this does is when you slam into something, any survivors within 8 meters of that slam will have their aura revealed to you for 3.5 seconds, and this will stack for every additional slam. So if you hit something, see someone, see them running, and then slam something else, that 3.5 seconds will reapply, so it'll be 7 seconds, and so on for every additional slam. And that also counts for when you come out of the slam. When the slam ends, the aura will remain for a little bit. Really good for beginners and experienced players. Despite its nerf, it is still quite a strong, good add-on to use. But it did get nerfed, and it was a lot stronger back when Blight first came out. But yeah, Compound 21, I'd say, is still quite a good add-on for him. Next up is Blighted Crow. This will increase your rush speed by 6% for each rush. It's the exact same as the Blighted Rat, but slightly faster by an extra 2%. So instead of being 4%, it's 6%. And this will make you move at 236 in your second rush, 242 in your third, 248 in your fourth, and 254 in the last rush. Finally, for greens, we have the Adrenaline Vial. This is probably one of his most different add-ons. Like, it's the one that affects his power the most, probably next to the Shredded Notes. What the Adrenaline Vial does is it decreases your turn rate by a whole 80%, but it gives you 2 extra tokens, taking you up from 5 to 7. Decreases your recharge rate per token by 0.66 seconds, so instead of it being 2 seconds per token, it's 2.66 per token. And obviously you've got more tokens, and it increases the maximum luck angle during a rush. So this is a lot of things getting changed by this one little add-on. It is a big joke, this add-on. It's very difficult to use, and it really, really changes up how you use Blight's power. You don't turn with this add-on. When I said go in straight lines, this add-on will make you go in straight lines. Like, you don't have a choice. Whereas with his power normally, you can you know, you can do slight curves and flick into walls at the last second to get a slam off if you weren't going to get one, or you can turn. If you use Adrenaline Vial, you're going in a straight line. You've got no say in that. You can move the camera slightly further away. That's what the increased look angle is. You can do like drifts. Basically, you can be heading forward, turn to your right, and then you'll be moving left, but you'll be facing right. It's really complicated, but in short, the Adrenaline Vial is a joke add-on. It changes loads of things and really, really makes the power just terrible, really. So now we move on to the purple category of add-ons, starting off with Vigo's Journal. This is a really fun add-on. It makes you undetectable during a rush, so you have no terror radius, no stain. The survivors have no idea you're there whenever you're using your power, apart from the sound cues that Blight gives off, which is sort of this really loud-ish sound. It's weird to describe. It sounds monstrous, basically. Really fun add-on, Vigo's Journal, making you undetectable. Good for some sneaky players. Would catch a lot of survivors off guard. Kind of like using Tinkerer. I wouldn't recommend it for general use. It's quite a gimmicky, fun add-on, but in terms of like throwing it in your normal builds, if you just want to play normally and play tryhardy, I wouldn't use this add-on. It's kind of a gimmick. It's fun, but it's not recommended. Next we have Summoning Stone. Now what this does is this takes the effect of one of Blight's perks, Blood Favor, and it applies it to an add-on. So when you hit a survivor using your rush, so not basic attacks, just your rush, you will block all pallets within 12 meters for 6 seconds. You might think, oh, that's really, really strong. It blocks the pallets. It's you know, that's really, really good. Why isn't that good? Why do you sound so depressed over this add-on, Skinny? What's wrong with this? Well, it's because Blight, when you hit someone, is stunned for 3 seconds and can't attack. He's in his fatigue state. This add-on only blocks pallets for 6 seconds. So if you take away the 3 seconds that you're stunned for, it only blocks them for 3 seconds. And even then, it's in a 12-meter radius. So assuming the survivor doesn't run out of that distance, which it's very easy for them to do with their speed boost, or they don't, or even if they do camp a pallet that was in that radius, by the time you've finished your cooldown, found the survivor and got to the pallet will unblock. Like, Summoning Stone on paper sounds like a really strong, fun add-on, but in practice, it's just not. It's damaged heavily by the fact that, like, you can't decrease the fatigue state for a successful hit. Like the Cankerthorn and the Foxglove don't work on successful hit cooldown, so there's no way to gain back any seconds using Summoning Stone, so you're just stuck with a 3-second block within 12 meters that's barely going to work. I mean, even if you down a survivor on a pallet, it's not going to protect you from a pallet stun, because by the time you come out your cooldown, pick up the survivor, and get back into the pickup animation, the pallet's unblocked. It unblocks the moment you press space to pick them up, or press whatever button it is on console. You know, the Summoning Stone on paper sounds great, but in practice, it's just not. So I wouldn't recommend using this. It's really, really not good. Next we have Soul Chemical. Now this used to be a very good add-on. It used to be similar to Compound 21, but instead of revealing survivors during a slam, it would reveal them during the rush, so while you're moving. However, that got changed recently, and now it does something different. What this add-on now does is when you slam into something, any survivors within 16 meters will get a difficult skill check similar to Oppression or Overcharge, and it will obviously, because it's so unexpected and quite small and difficult, they're most likely to mess it up. So what its purpose is you slam into something. If a survivor's on a gen or healing within 16 meters, they mess up the skill check, you see the notification, you send yourself off in that direction. However, this add-on only triggers the skill check for survivors once per rush, so you can't trigger it twice per rush. I don't know why that's mentioned in the add-on description, because you can't slam twice per rush, you only ever slam once per rush, so I don't know what the devs were thinking when they wrote that, but hey ho, the devs are brilliant at writing confusing add-on descriptions. And also, if you begin the rush within 16 meters of a survivor and then slam into something, it won't work. It only applies it if you started the rush outside of 16 meters, so this is done so that you don't give a survivor 2 difficult skill checks back to back. So you slam into something, they're in 16 meters of that slam distance, they get a difficult skill check, and then if you send yourself in that direction and slam into something again, it won't cause another one, it'll just do nothing. It can be quite a fun, strong add-on if you pair it with something like Lullaby or Unnerving Presence, or maybe even Oppression. If they think you might kick a gen, they might think you kicked a gen, but instead you slammed into something next to them and you're on top of them. But I wouldn't recommend it for general use. Again, it's just a bit of a fun, gimmicky add-on. Finally, for purples, we have his strongest and one of his best add-ons out there. Really broken. Personally, I think this should be an iridescent, it should be pink, because it's just insanely stupid, but we have the Alchemist Ring. This will instantly give you back all of your tokens after you hit a survivor successfully. So instead of having to wait to recharge, you will immediately be back at 5 or 7 if you use Adrenaline Vial, or 4 if you use Shredded Notes. You will immediately be back at your maximum amount, and this means you can instantly use your power again and be off and go for them. Really, really strong, really crazy add-on that sometimes survivors will not expect this if immediately you just zoom right back at them. Any distance they gain from the hit speed boost is just negated because you can just zoom back on them. But I will warn, there is a very nasty bug with this add-on, and I've not seen anyone ever address this bug. It's difficult to know exactly what triggers it, but sometimes when you're using this Alchemist Ring, you can trigger the rush too soon, and instead of going off again, it will just instantly force you into a cooldown without moving anywhere, and you'll lose a token. It doesn't stop the add-on being strong. It's a really strong, really, really overpowered add-on. Well, not overpowered, because you actually have to be good with Blight to get lots of value out of it, but it's a really strong add-on. But just do be warned, there is that bug out there, and it will throw you off. Finally, we move on to the pink add-ons, starting with the one I've already mentioned earlier. This is the Iridescent Blight tag. This will give you an instant down on the last rush only. So you have 5 tokens, 4 of those tokens, well, 3 technically, because the first one you can't attack out of. 3 of those tokens will just be normal hits that will do 1 health state of damage and then send the survivor away. But on that very, very last rush, if you hit a survivor who's healthy with that, they're dead, they're on the ground, they're down. This is a really fun add-on, pairs brilliantly with Shredded Notes, so you only have 4 tokens then, you've got an even bigger chance of using the power. But again, gimmicky, wouldn't use it for general gameplay, especially because it forces you to be on your last rush for the down, and a lot of the times you'll need more than 1 rush to be able to recenter and plan and, trick a survivor during a loop. Lastly, we have Compound 33. Now, this is a really strong add-on according to some people. Personally, I don't really like it, but to each their own. This add-on will let you slam into breakable walls and pallets and instantly break them, and this will only stun you for 1.5 seconds. It also applies the hindered stats effect to any survivors within 16 meters of a slam for 3 seconds. Now, the reason people consider this really strong is because it gets rid of pallets a lot faster than you normally would, and also it gives you information, because whenever you give them the hindered effect, it pops up with a little score event on the side of your screen. So if you slam into something and don't hear or see a survivor, but then that thing pops up, okay, someone's in 16 meters of me, and then you can see this little leaky sort of orange trail behind them from the hindered effect. The reason I consider this not to be as strong as people say it is because Blight can already break pallets and walls as part of his base kit. If you rush towards a pallet or rush towards a breakable wall in a lethal rush and swing, it will break that pallet or break that wall. So you don't really need this add-on to do that, because this is already part of his base kit. Granted, this add-on does it quicker, because you don't need to be in a lethal rush, and it gives you it gives you a significantly faster cooldown from breaking them, and also the info. But personally, I don't really like this add-on. But again, to each their own. You might think it's quite strong. I don't. But that sums up all of Blight's add-ons. That's every single add-on covered there, and yeah, that's that section done. We'll now move on to the next section. So, we're now on to one of the last sections of the guide, and this is what I'm calling the advanced tips. I say advanced like it's something you'll only be able to do when you get significantly good with Blight, but it's more something you'll be able to do when you're comfortable with him and you learn how to use the power or have a basic grasp or understanding of the power. So the first of these advanced tips is something I call grinding. This is a technique where during Blight's attack in a lethal rush, so as soon as you click the attack button, you will lose all collision with anything that would normally trigger a slam. So you will be able to hit into trees, hit into walls, anything along those lines, and instead of slamming into them and being able to launch a new rush, if you swung the attack button, you'll glide along that thing and swing at the end, and then when you finish the swing, you'll fatigue. This can be used best on loops, especially around pallets, or on walls, like jungle gym walls. I'll put a clip on now if I can dig it out, or if not, you can go and see in the video against the streamer on Grim Pantry, where I do this along some barrels on the main building, because I see that a David is camping a pallet at the end, and I grind along the barrels, and at the end of that I hit him, and he doesn't expect it because he doesn't see my stain because it's hidden by the wall, and he doesn't expect me to be able to hit that angle because the wall, the curve during the grind allows you to wrap around the wall better and pull off curves that you wouldn't normally be able to pull off with the limited turn rate. This is a difficult technique to get used to because obviously when you swing it increases your turn rate slightly, so you're more likely to overshoot it and end up getting stuck on things. I know I myself do misjudge this a lot and get stuck on a lot of props during rushes. It's something that you'll have to learn to mess up to get good with, but that's just Blight in a nutshell. But yeah, grinding is one of those techniques where you swing your attack, you aim into a wall, and then what will happen is you'll run along that wall, and then by the time you finish the attack, you'll hopefully hit the survivor on the end. It works brilliantly on loops, and it really gets you some hits that they wouldn't expect. It also works on if a survivor's hiding behind something like a tree, you can swing into the tree a second earlier, and you'll hit them around the corner before they manage to zip round. And the last advanced tip that I'll give, again, advanced is loosely used there, is that you can actually use your rush while you are airborne. So you're not limited to only while being on the ground. It does kind of go a bit weird when you use it while airborne, but you can do this. Basically, if you're falling from a window, down a hole, or off a hill, you will be able to rush even while you're in the air, and it sometimes will send you forward, and sometimes you'll just hold you in place in the air, and then when you hit the ground again, you'll zip off, kind of like an old Looney Tunes cartoon, you know, just dangling your legs away in the air, and then you hit the ground and then fly away. But you can use this to your advantage a lot, because you will be able to hit things that survivors won't expect you to hit, such as a lot of the hills on the maps have trees just after them. You can hit into those trees while you're still in the air as you come off the hill and begin a rush from there, rather than wait until you drop off the hill and then getting it. And it allows you to have better visibility on survivors when you launch your rush, because obviously you're starting from an elevated position, you can see them and zoom after them. It also works great in, for example, the hole above the bathroom in the game, the map of the game. If you rush there, you'll hit the walls at the top of the hole, drop down the hole, and then often you'll be right on top of survivors, and you only need to just rush and click, and boom, you've got them. Or if they're on the gen, they don't expect you to drop down and be there, they'll think you're somewhere else. It's brilliant. But yeah, all I'll say is you can use your power while in midair. This also works great actually for things like similar to Pig or Billy. You can actually go over the top of things like windows, or some props you'll ride, like some walls you'll ride along the top of. I have a clip which should be on screen now of my Blight on Family Residence on the Yamaoka maps, where I went off the top of the hill and ended up on top of a prop that you're not supposed to be on top of, but because of Blight's speed and the fact that you can still move while in the air, I landed directly on top of this thing. It also works great, sticky with Yamaoka on the Sanctum of Wrath map. The corners around that main building, if you fly off the top of the stairs where there's gaps in the stair rails, you'll be able to curve off the sort of diagonal stones and get a good hit on survivors that they won't expect. However, I will warn, you can use the power in midair, but swinging an attack in midair pretty much doesn't work 9 times out of 10. It's very buggy. Blight as a killer is very buggy. And the final advanced tip that I'll give, that's not really a tip, more of a warning. Blight collision is very difficult it's something you will learn through playing. It's difficult to tell you about. There's a series of props which I have gathered through my time playing Blight, and I've made sort of notes in my head what you can bounce off of, what you sometimes can bounce off of, and what you'll just go flying straight past or flying off. This is largely down to the fact that a lot of the collisions are bugged. Most of these things you should slam into, but a few brief examples, some things you'll never collide with, that you'll just go straight off, they have no collision, are chests, totems, the front side of the park benches on Haddonfield, the bit where you actually sit, not the sides or the back, the birch trees on Autohaven that like split in two, the ones that have got like a Y shape to them, can't bounce off them at all. Any of the trees that are like a greenish yellow colour on Swamp, can't hit into them. Cars on most maps, you won't be able to hit into them. A lot of things you just won't hit into, and then there's some things that have partial collision. A couple of things I mentioned in that list actually have collision in one very specific spot along the prop, but everything else you'll glide along. You'll just go straight along and it'll be as if you're not bumping into anything. One other thing you need to look out for with Blight, especially with maps like Dead Dog and Swamp. Oh, speaking of Dead Dog, there's also a pile of logs behind the saloon where the loop tile is, just opposite the hanging place, the gallows. They have no collision along the ramping part of the logs. The flat part, where it's the flat end of the logs, you'll slam into, but the bit where it goes up in the triangle sort of shape, you know what I mean, I'll show a picture. That has no collision, you'll go right off that. But maps like Dead Dog and Swamp are particularly bad because there's a lot of places where you'll rush into and you will get stuck. You won't slam, you won't move anywhere, you'll just be stuck in a corner until you fatigue, and then that's it, that's your power gone. This is something that you will have to get used to as a Blight player, kind of like his limited height, because it's just a bug with the character, it's a fault with the character, and until the devs fix something about it, it's just a quirk of Blight that hopefully if you're really still that into playing him or maining him, you'll put up with. I know I myself, I get a little bit frustrated at the collision not working, but I put up with it because I've been maining Blight for a while, and I kind of just know that this is a thing that happens. You just have to put up with it. It's the same with any other killer, like, you know, Trapper's Traps, you know, people getting out of them, even though they're changing that, or like Wraith being spotted before you can uncloak. It's just quirks of the character that you're going to have to put up with until the devs do something about it. But yeah, that's the end of the advanced tips / warnings / you know, last little things I wanted to mention about Blight. So yeah, that's the end of the guide. I hope this guide has helped a lot of you after watching it to consider maining or playing Blight, because he's a really, really fun, rarely played killer that's just amazing to play, and I really, really wish more people would play a Blight. There's not enough people who play him out there. But that being said, I've been Skinny. Thank you for checking out this video and sticking to the end. It really means a lot. Hopefully you consider subscribing and sticking around to watch more of my content. But until then, see you in the fog.